Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for your invitation. It's wonderful to be part of this initiative. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Can you hear me? Am I too far from? Yeah, okay, good. Like Andrew, I was asked to speak about my experience and what brought me to the changes that I have made on the farm and what the outcomes of those changes have been and what are the policy initiatives. And I've been very happy to address those things with you. I have had, well, first of all, I'm an unlikely farmer. I didn't grow up on a farm. I wasn't feeding calves as a kid, and I didn't go to agricultural college after my leaving cert. I went about getting an arts degree, but in the end had to come home because my father's deteriorating health. So I came home to a farm that was badly, in the late 1970s, badly in need of modernisation and redevelopment. Fortunately, I was coming in at a time when Ireland had joined the EEC and there was a farm modernisation scheme, and we went gung-ho into reclaiming land and building sheds and things that lots of farmers will identify with. So there was a big lot of capital investment by me doing a farm school at the time, and my dad, who was ailing. And we changed from, at that time, a system where he was buying in store cattle and fattening them to a calf-to-beef enterprise, which was then sort of the bee's knees in terms of the next stage of development within farming. So that went on for a couple of years, and then my dad died, and I continued the programme on the basis that I was not going to be liable for a lot of capital tax. I had just then come into full possession of the land. So I went into the next phase of reclaiming 35 more acres and borrowing the money for that. And then 18 months down the road, Revenue wouldn't accept the figures that I had from my valuer in terms of the valuation of the land. At that time, there was quite a spike in land prices in the previous couple of years. And also, it turned out that I was deemed to have inherited from my grandfather and not from my father. So the thresholds for the capital taxes changed, much to my detriment. So what was a difficult financial position for me became impossible, and that brought me to the end of my first phase as a farmer. And for 10 years I went out, well actually for 12 years altogether, I left farming, and what happened was most of the farm was let to a neighbouring farmer who carried out normal farming practices, and I kept one guy on who did some maintenance on the farm and looked after, because our farm is surrounded by Bord na Móna, and it's verging onto the bog. There were also areas where we could cut turf, so he used to do a little bit of work like that for me. And that kept going. I was earning my income away from the farm. And subsequently, when the farmer who took the land from me died, some 10 years on, I reassessed the situation and decided that the land that he had been farming, which was mostly also in need of reclamation, I said, this doesn't make sense. I can spend all the money I spent before and get this back into grass and feed cattle and live in a hope that I might make money. Or I can do what Andrew says is difficult for lots of people, and he's right, is to change into forestry. So we put areas of land that we should have or could have reclaimed into a forestry program. I hired a forestry contractor, and we did 50 acres of mixed forestry, mixed depending on soil types. And that was the first thing we did, and it worked reasonably well. Lots of problems with the forestry contractor, and I decided that I was going to come back in to farm and look after the forestry myself at that point. So that was in 1996, I think I started back into farming. Now, in the meantime, I had being involved in gardening, had always kept a garden for our own house, and over the years had become interested in doing that in an organic way, which I found worked. And that also brought me into touch with a whole lot of organic farmers and growers. And I had lots of contacts in that side of the world. I'd also had the experience of working on a group water scheme, which I helped to set up when I was in my first outing as a farmer. And two things in particular there. There were farms who didn't join the scheme at the beginning, who subsequently had to join because they had poisoned their own water supply. And ultimately, the water scheme itself lost its well because there was farm waste getting into the water supply. So I had that experience as well. And then you don't go to Ballymaloe to learn about the environment, but I had the experience of Doreen Allen mentioning to me a book by Rachel Carson called The Silent Spring, which talks about research in America in the 1950s and 60s about the use of pesticides and in American agriculture. And that is a book which has made a big difference to my life and my way of thinking. So I became an organic farmer partly under all of those influences, and I've enjoyed the fruits of that in the meantime. So when I went back into farming, I went into suckler cows, which was a different enterprise to anything that had been done before. And we also introduced a new enterprise on the farm, which was to grow vegetables. Now, this was initially a scheme to employ one other person to assist me. We started with less than an acre and one polytunnel. And now, this year, we have 10 acres in organic vegetable production, 7 large polytunnels. The production side of the farm employs 4 people, and the pack house distribution side of the business has 3 people employed in it. So we have gone from a situation where the farm that was producing just beef in my father's time, in my early days, is producing beef. Sorry, I forgot to mention that we also introduced a sheep enterprise. So we've had quite a bit of different levels of progress. But and we're now producing beef, sheep, and a wide range of vegetables. The other thing we have done is on land where we had been cutting turf, as that land came out of production of turf, we have reseeded, gone back in there with grass, and then subsequently turned most of that land over to forestry. So now there's altogether 95 acres of the farm under trees in one shape, form or another. Okay? The other element of what we do is that we are direct selling. So we started with about 20 customers who were getting our veg box every week. That grew very quickly to 200. And we have subsequently, after, sometime about 10 years ago, as farmers' markets developed, we moved into farmers' markets in the towns where we were supplying our boxes. And a lot of the people who were getting boxes from us came to our market stalls and are buying from us that way. Those people, I'm glad to say, were still at our market stalls today as I was travelling here to meet you. We've had really good support from the local community. And most of the money that we are generating is also going back into the local community. People who have come to work on the farm continue to live in the area, their children go to school in the area, they buy whatever it is they're buying in the local area. So it's a real win-win. We're winning in the farm, but the community that we're serving is also winning. So that is the story of the farm. We sell all our sheep meat directly as well, apart from Cullio's, and a large part of the beef we're producing we sell directly into people's kitchens as well. So what does all this mean in terms of what you're here talking about? I think Organics is one of the solutions to the climate change, because it means that we have less inputs going into the farm. It means that we have also fewer outputs from the farm, which means you're reducing your stock. But you're doing it at a price that's fair to you and fair to the people who are buying from you. Our food costs more. We find customers for it. But this is the reality of, if you get more money for your produce, you can afford to produce less of it and still have an income. So this is part of the solution. The other part of the solution, forestry, has been talked about. And what I would like to say about that is that going into the last phase of forestry we did helped us to reduce our cattle numbers. We dropped 17 cows in that from 2005 to now, just simply by changing over to forestry. Difficult to persuade people to do that. And you already know from the earlier presentations that the schemes that are in place are not achieving their targets. And I think something akin to the effort that went into rural electrification when the ASB had to persuade people that it was safe to put electricity into their houses years ago, something like that is needed to persuade farmers to actually turn some land over to forestry. There are lots of reasons. If you have good land, and you can get a good income from your farm enterprises, the scheme of forest payments has to be able to compete with the income that you get from your forest payment. With regard to organics, it is unfortunate to have to say that there isn't any real support at the moment. The scheme that serves farmers that Alan mentioned earlier is closed off. All the money that's in that scheme from now to 2020 is already allocated. So in terms of market growth, in Ireland last year the market growth was 23% in people consuming organic produce. The results will be out shortly for this year. It will come in very close to that again, I think. So there's a market growth, there's an export potential that we're not achieving. In the Organic Trust that I'm associated with, there are approximately 700 inquiries since the scheme closed from people who were interested in becoming organic farmers. That scheme is not going to open again within the current resources. So the obvious solution is to put more resources in. I think that's what I need to say. I had a third point in terms of policy initiatives, which mirrors exactly the last slide that you saw from Andrew, which is about putting solar panels and encouraging farmers to invest in renewable energy. Thank you for your time.